everyone. Oh, we have another class that's here from Herb Campbell here. How many people are with you? Grade 2 and 3 class. Awesome. So Mrs. Stewart's class can hear me fine. There's 18 people with Mary Lou here. So hi everyone and welcome to this Canadian Wildlife Federation webinar on the Monarch. My name is Annie Langlois. I'm the coordinator for the Hinterland Who's Who program. I'm also a biologist. So if ever you have questions, don't hesitate. I'm going to ask you though, if you do have questions that you want to ask me using your microphone or camera, please wait until the end of the webinar. Otherwise, you can type them here on the chat at any time, and I will try to keep an eye on that so that I can answer your questions. So, the Monarch. So you've probably seen monarchs around. They're pretty recognizable. So here are a few images here. They're probably the most recognizable insect that we have here in Canada, so we'll get to know it a bit better today. So the monarch is an insect. What does that mean? All insects actually don't have skeletons inside their bodies like us. They don't have bones, but they have an outer skeleton called an exoskeleton that covers the outside of their bodies, that keeps them nice and hard. So that's called an exoskeleton, meaning that it's outside their body instead of inside like us. All insects have that. They also have 3 pairs of legs, so in total 6 legs. So spiders have 8 legs. That means they're not insects. All insects have only 6 legs. Their body has 3 parts to them: the head, the thorax, and the abdomen. And that's the case for all insects, including monarchs. They have eyes called compound eyes. So they look at stuff, they can see it. It's like looking through kaleidoscope. So they see the same image repetitively all throughout their eyes. They don't see one image, they see a lot of them. So all insects have that too. And they have antennae on their heads, just 1 pair, so 2 of them. Also, a lot of insects, most insects have, they change throughout their lives. So they have a larval stage. So when they're babies, when they're young, they look like caterpillars, for example. And then they change into their adult stage. And that's pretty obvious for butterflies. It's called metamorphosis. And as I said, the monarch is pretty recognizable. And it's pretty common too for now. So the monarch is orange and it has black and white and sometimes yellow patterns on their wings. Some are a wee bit different. As you see in the image at the bottom of my slide here, some are white. They're actually pretty common in Hawaii. Here in Canada, they can be found, but they're pretty rare. Their wingspan, so from one end of the wing to the other, where they're broadest, it's about 10 centimeters wide. They're actually pretty big. Sometimes you can see monarchs that are a bit darker, that have a different wing shape, and that's pretty normal. But also, when they're migrating, they might change a bit physically. So their coloring might change, and so their size might change a bit. And the males and the females are a bit different. At the top photo here on my slide, on the top there, you see a male, and at the bottom is a female. So you see the male, the black stripes that are on there are actually narrower. They're smaller than the female, and they have this black dot at the end of their hind wing as well, like close to their body. So that's the main difference between male and female. Also, males are a bit bigger, as I was saying. And the monarch does fly quite well. It has a slow and sailing flight, so it relies a lot on air currents to be airborne, but they're actually pretty graceful to see flying. Okay, so you see 2 butterflies on here. One is a monarch, so the butterfly we're talking about today, and the other one is called a viceroy, and they look pretty similar. So look at both butterflies and try to spot a few differences if you can. And I'll tell you which one is which in a minute, but try in your class or in your head to figure out which one do you think is a monarch. So see, both are orange, both have black stripes, both have white markings, but which one is which? I'll leave you a minute to observe them. So basically, here are the differences to look out, because you might be confused if you see an orange butterfly like this to know which one is which if you don't have the other one that's just next besides it. So monarchs are larger, for one thing, but also if you follow the green arrow on the side here, you'll see that viceroy have a black stripe on their hind wing that monarchs do not. So that's a telltale difference between monarchs and viceroy. So the viceroy is actually called a mimic. It imitates the monarch, and we'll see why in a bit. So from the photos we had initially, the one on the right was the monarch. As you see, the one on the left has this black stripe on its hind wings, and the monarch does not. So part of the answer to why viceroys look so much like monarchs, it has to do with the monarch's food. So the adult monarchs, like butterfly monarchs, they feed on nectar of many types of flowers, including coneflowers, like the one at the bottom here, the purple coneflower. While doing this, they actually help pollinate. So by visiting a few extra flowers that are different, they spread the pollen from the flowers amongst the other flowers. So that helps the flowers, the plants actually reproduce. But the larvae of the monarch, so the caterpillar, doesn't do that. He eats only one thing, and that's milkweed. That's the picture that's right beside those pinkish flowers. That's a specimen of milkweed. And part of the answer that we're looking for, why the viceroy looks like the monarch, is actually linked to the milkweed here. So we're going to talk a bit more about milkweed and you'll understand better. So if you don't have milkweed around your place or your house, there probably won't be any monarchs because a monarch actually really needs this milkweed. So there's about 27 species of milkweed in Canada, and they feed on these milkweed, the caterpillars. As you see on the image at the bottom there, there's a caterpillar that's eating on the leaves. Sometimes the adult butterfly also feeds on the pollen of the milkweed flowers, but they really actually need it when they're small, so caterpillars. So the milkweed, why only milkweeds? Well, the milkweed is actually toxic. So it has toxic substances in its leaves and flowers, which the monarch can eat, no problem. And while the caterpillar eats the leaf, it actually stores the toxins in its body. So it keeps the toxic substances in the caterpillar's body. This is pretty cool. It makes the monarchs toxic to eat. So when predators, for example, birds, eat a monarch, first of all, it's going to taste pretty bad, and then they might get sick. So the fact that the monarchs become toxic is because of the food they eat. So they eat so much milkweed, especially when they're young as caterpillars, and so they become themselves toxic. It's their defense against predators. And because the monarch is orange and black like that, it's really easy for predators to learn to stop eating them. So they might eat one, get sick, and then when they see another monarch, because they're pretty recognizable to predators too, they'll say, oh, no, I'm not going to eat this again. I got sick the last time. So the viceroy, the other butterfly that looks like a monarch, doesn't do that. He's not toxic at all. But because he looks like a monarch, he might be not eaten by predators. So the predators will look at the butterfly, he will see orange and black. Whether it's a monarch or a viceroy, he's not going to eat that again because he got sick the last time. So the viceroy basically mimics the monarch so that predators won't eat it. It's pretty cool. So the monarch, where is it found? Well, you can find it throughout North America, and so from Central America in the south, northwards to South Canada, and from the Atlantic to Pacific coasts. It's basically the pink area on the map, and the area that has the lines, the pink lines on the map as well. So in Canada, it's found in all 10 provinces and in the Northwest Territories. It doesn't go further north, because there's no milkweed. So the monarch, there's 3 different populations in the Americas. There's the eastern monarch, which is 90% of all our monarchs. So big majority of monarchs are from the eastern population. There's a western population, and there's a Central American population that lives in the south. So each population is a bit different, they look a bit different, and also they migrate differently. So they don't really meet one another very often. That's why they're a bit different. So the eastern population. So east of the Rocky Mountains, when you look at the map here, you'll see there's a line in Canada and the US that's sort of curved up. And so this line is basically the Rocky Mountains. And butterflies don't do well in mountains, so they don't live in them. So everything that's in the east of those mountains is actually part of the eastern population monarch habitat. So monarchs can be found anywhere, those monarchs can be found anywhere east of the Rocky Mountains. That's why they're the most populous. That's why they're 90% of the whole monarch population, because they have such a broad habitat to live in. So these monarchs, they actually migrate in one itsy bitsy area of Mexico. If you look at the map there, you'll see there's Mexico in the south, and there's a circle that surrounds a little bit of land that's in blue. And so that's where they spend the winters, and that's it. And that area, there's 12 sites in there, and all the eastern population monarchs go spend the winter there. Every single one of them. So they are in Mexico during the winter, so from November to late December. That's when they arrive there, and they stay there until March to early April. So they spend all the winters there, and then they leave. So in March and early April, the monarchs leave Mexico and they go up the eastern coast, but they don't go all the way at once. So they migrate in stages. So they might go a third of the way or half of the way, find milkweed, and then reproduce. So the females will lay eggs, and so the caterpillars will be born. We'll see more about that later. And so the next generation of monarch that are born halfway or a third of the way goes another way, goes the other half of the way or the other third of the way. And so this happens 2 to 3 times along the eastern side of North America. So they migrate in stages. They stop, they reproduce. Then the next generation carries on. So the individuals that arrive in Canada, they might be the second or third generation from the ones that have left Mexico. And so they start arriving in Canada at the end of May or in early June. And while they're in Canada, while they're there for the summer, 2 to 3 generations might be born and die during that summer. And the last generation that's born, so at late summer, the last generation that's born leave Canada and they go all the way down to Mexico where their great-great-great-great-grandparents were born. So these guys, they travel thousands of kilometers all the way to Mexico. They leave Canada in early August to mid-October, and they get to Mexico in November to late December. So those are the biggest travelers in there. So to make a round trip, so from Mexico up north to Canada and all the way back, it takes about 5 generations of monarchs to do that. So it's not one monarch won't come from Mexico to Canada and go back. It takes about 5 generations. But there will be a generation of monarchs who will leave Canada and go all the way from Mexico at once in one trip. So the Western population of monarchs, they're different again. They're west of the Rocky Mountains. So they're different. They don't ever cross the mountains. They stay there. They're a bit different from the eastern ones. So actually, those monarchs are mostly American. They live mostly in the United States. They will only arrive in Canada when on really sunny and warm years. So like the eastern monarchs, they don't migrate all the way at once going north. They do it in stages. So if it's really warm and sunny, then a generation will make it to British Columbia. And the last generation that's born of the summer migrates all the way to the Mexican border. If you can look at the map on the western coast of the United States, close to the Mexican border in California, that's where they spend their winters. That's the area in blue on the map. And so the third population of monarchs is a Central American population. It's found in Central America, so in Mexico, Guatemala, and so we never see them here in Canada. And these guys, they don't really migrate for long distances. They stick around the same areas. They might move around because of wet or dry conditions and the weather. So they don't migrate very far, and they can actually reproduce throughout the year. So the monarch migration, it's a pretty cool phenomenon. So monarchs actually migrate in groups, a bit like geese, if you will, but groups of like hundreds of individuals. And so when you see them migrating, I had the chance to see that when I was a child. It's pretty cool to see. So there's so many monarchs that it's hard to tell them from one another. So we talked about milkweed for a bit. So in the spring and summer, when the monarchs actually reproduce, it's super important to have access to milkweed because, again, that's the only thing that their caterpillars, their larvae, will eat. So milkweed, it grows on abandoned farmlands, along roadsides, in other open areas. They don't grow really in the forest. They grow in open areas where there's sun. So that's where the milkweed grows. And so because since Europeans have come to North America, the landscape has changed quite a bit. The habitats have changed because of more farmland. So the monarchs have adapted quite a bit to that because we have more farms, and so there might be a bit more milkweed growing in some areas. It's probably not the case right now, but throughout time, the monarchs did adapt. So while it's migrating, another habitat that the monarch will need, they will roost in trees. So they need to rest once in a while when they're flying. So they choose trees in groups to rest. And also another thing they like to do during migration is to ride columns of warm air and wind so that they don't waste a lot of energy. So they just ride the wind to be carried during migration. And often they go back to the same spots year after year to roost or rest. That's the case of the Point Pelée National Park in Ontario and also the Presqu'île Provincial Park in Ontario as well. They like to rest there before they actually cross the Great Lakes when they're migrating. So their habitat in the wintertime, the eastern population, they go to a really small area in Mexico. Those areas are high up in the mountains, and the habitat is actually Oyamel fir forest. So only one type of tree that lives there up in the mountains, and that's the only place that they go for the winter. The western population who will winter in California and northern Mexico, they like areas where there's a lot of eucalyptus trees. So that's where they go and spend their winter. So that's an example of how it looks in their wintering areas in Mexico, the Oyamel fir forest. So basically, the monarchs cover the trees like that, and it's pretty neat. They look like leaves, like orange leaves on the fir trees. So the monarch has a bit of a complex life cycle. Um, so they go through metamorphosis, so they change quite a bit. So the adult that's on the left will lay eggs. The female will lay an egg, or many eggs actually. They mate as adults. Sorry about, I forgot about that. So they mate as adults, and then the females will lay about 400 eggs under milkweed leaves. So that's pretty cool. That's pretty practical because when the caterpillars hatch, they're already on their food. So it's perfect. They don't need to travel very far. So the eggs hatch in about 3 to 12 days. It depends on weather. And then the larvae are born. And so that's what a larvae looks like, the caterpillar, the monarch of the caterpillar of the monarch. It's pretty cool. It's white, yellow, and black, and it's pretty recognizable. Again, for predators, they will learn really fast not to eat those because they're toxic. And so the larvae, so the caterpillar will eat the milkweed for 2 weeks until they're about 5 centimeters long. Then when it's big enough, it will find a twig to attach itself, and it will actually stay upside down. So with their heads down, they attach themselves by their hind feet on a twig, and in a few hours they become a chrysalis, which is the cocoon that you see at the bottom there. So if you see those green cocoons, it's possibly a monarch. Sorry about that. So the chrysalis stays like that for about 2 weeks. And after 2 weeks, an adult emerges from the chrysalis. And so that's basically the life cycle of the monarch. So the adults, which migrate, so the ones that leave Canada and go all the way to Mexico, they can live up to 9 months. And that's probably the maximum that they can survive. I'm very sorry. So that's basically how it looks when an adult monarch comes out of the chrysalis. So it's a pretty unique insect, the monarch. You have a better picture here of the caterpillar eating away at a milkweed leaf, and actually an adult at the bottom on a milkweed flower. So they don't really mind where there's humans. They can breed or they can feed in areas where there's high human activity. As long as milkweed populations are healthy, they're pretty good. We don't know of any other insect that has a migration like that, so it's possibly unique on this earth. Airline pilots have seen monarchs as high as 1 kilometer up in the sky, so they can fly pretty high following the winds and air columns. And a bit like birds, before they migrate, the monarchs will actually feed more. They will feed on a lot more nectar. They will visit a lot of flowers, so they build up their energy reserves and their fat reserves so that they're ready to fly away. And now there's monarchs actually in Hawaii, Australia, and other islands of the Pacific that have been brought over. And it's been seen once in a while in Europe, probably brought there by ships accidentally, but there's no population that lives there. Other cool facts. So the eastern population of monarchs is actually in the tens of millions of individuals. It sounds pretty big, but it's actually decreasing right now. The western population is a few millions, so much less. Monarch populations have been going up and down throughout history, and that's because of storms, because of diseases, because of bad years weather-wise, so a few other factors. And so that can be pretty normal. But recently, the eastern population has gone down quite a bit. And scientists think it's because of climate change and also because of the disappearance of milkweed. Because where people live now, milkweed can grow no problem, but because we like our gardens with lovely different flowers or roses or whatnot, we don't let milkweed grow. So that's pretty bad for monarchs. Luckily, you can help, because one thing that we can do to help out monarchs is actually to plant milkweed. So if you can tell your parents about this and perhaps plant milkweed in your garden. And if you see milkweed in your area, keep an eye out on it and you might see a monarch. So to finish this, we're going to watch the Hinterland Who's Who video on the monarch. I'll put this on.
If you were asked to name the first butterfly that came to mind, I bet you'd say the monarch, probably because its beautiful orange, black, and white wings are so memorable. But there's more to this little creature than just good looks. Even though they appear delicate, monarch butterflies undertake the grueling task of migrating thousands of kilometers to Mexico each year. To survive the long trip, these butterflies will need to feed on nectar from wild-flowering plants. Problem is, some people consider these plants pesky weeds and use herbicides to get rid of them. How can you help? Look into ways of making your garden butterfly-friendly. Try planting butterfly weed, asters, and other flowering plants. And before you know it, many butterflies will be calling your backyard home. But that's just a start. When you go to hww.ca, you'll find out more about the monarch butterfly and get ideas on how to help protect Canada's wildlife. That's hww.ca.
Sorry for coughing so much. Okay, so for more information, this didn't go well. So for more information, you can always go on Hinterland Who's Who's website. So that's hww.ca, and you'll get the full fact sheet on the monarch, and you can watch our monarch videos. Also, you can visit the Canadian Wildlife Federation website, and there's a section about pollinators and migrators, and so monarchs are actually both. So for now, do you guys have any questions I could answer? You can type them on the chat here, or ask them using your microphone and camera. Is everyone good? So no questions at all? Oh, no, I see. There's someone typing. Ooh, that's a good one. Someone that studies insects is an entomologist. So it's a type of biologist who studies insects. Entomologist. So if you want to study monarchs, for example, you have to become an entomologist. Any other questions? Do the predators die if they eat the monarchs? No, probably not. But it tastes really, really badly, and so they can be sick. So it's enough to tell them not to do that ever again. It's probably more useful if they don't die, because then they can learn. And so some animals can actually tell other animals not to eat them. So no, they don't die. Or rarely do. I don't expect they do very often. No. What are their predators? A lot of birds might eat butterflies. That's their main one. Um, so other critters that eat insects, their caterpillars could be eaten by raccoons or skunks, or small mammals like that. But again, their caterpillars are also very bad to eat, so I don't expect they're eaten very often. Ooh, the best places to plant milkweed. Milkweed's like the sun. So anywhere you have in your yard or where you live that has a lot of sun, you can plant milkweed. Ooh, how far did they migrate in one day? Well, they go from Canada to Mexico in so from August to November. That's August, September, October. So 3 months. I really don't know. So they do thousands of kilometers in 3 months. They probably migrate pretty far in a day, depending on the wind too. So they like to ride the wind and ride the hot air columns that we have. So it probably depends on weather. They can possibly also get blown off course if there's a storm. So that's hard to answer. I'm sorry. Do they like other plants besides milkweed? The adults, the butterflies, can feed the nectar of many types of flowers that you could plant around your house or that are wild. But the eggs are only laid under milkweed leaves, and the caterpillars, the larvae, only eat milkweed. So that's it. They're pretty picky, aren't they? How long does it take for milkweed to grow? Well, milkweed can grow pretty tall in a few months, so it's there in the summer. Um, Here in Canada, they're growing right now. The monarchs won't get here before it's there. So in June, possibly we'll start seeing it, and so it's there for the summer. And it's a pretty tall plant. It's about a meter tall. Is milkweed poisonous? It's not recommended for humans to eat it because again, it could make us sick. It is toxic. It won't kill animals, so it won't kill us. But it's still not good to eat. So I don't recommend putting milkweed in your salad at all. But you can touch it. It's just if you break the leaves, then there's a milky substance. That's why it's called milkweed, and so that's the toxic part. Do other animals eat milkweed? Not that I know of, actually. Their flowers are possibly pollinated, of course, by bees and other pollinators like that. But the leaves, I think it's pretty much the monarch that eats it. Ooh, okay. What does monarch mean, and why are they called monarchs? Uh, The other word for monarch is actually the word king. So we call let's say the Queen or King of England the monarch of England. It's another word to say Queen or King. So basically, this butterfly is the Queen or King of butterflies. They're pretty big and they're pretty impressive and they're bright orange coloring. That's probably why they're called monarchs. Why are they orange and black? There are studies that have been made on different animals that can learn. For example, crows. I studied crows. And so if you have coloring like that, so orange and black, or yellow and black, or red and black, so very bright contrasting colors, it makes it easier for animals to learn that things are not good to eat. So they've possibly evolved with those colors because it's easier to get the message across to predators that don't eat me. I'm brightly colored. It means that I'm toxic. It means that I'm not good to eat. What are the reactions of animals if they eat a monarch? Well, first of all, again, it tastes really bad. So I expect that animals are a bit disgusted, and then they'll start being sick. They will vomit. So that's it's like you eat something really, really bad. And so then when they're recovering, after they've recovered, they don't feel like eating monarchs ever again. How long does it take to hatch out of the cocoons? It takes, I think, earlier, I'm going to refresh my memory. Um, if I remember correctly, it takes about for 2 weeks for them to hatch out of the cocoon. So the eggs hatch in 3 to 12 days. So that's a itsy bitsy eggs. And so the larvae, the caterpillar feeds for about 2 weeks until it gets 5 centimeters long. And then they turn into chrysalis or cocoon. And then it takes, well, overall, so from eggs to an adult butterflies, it takes from 20 to 45 days in total. Do monarchs fly at night? They typically fly during the day. They roost at night, so they find a nice tree where they can group and relax for a bit because it's hard to fly for long periods of time like that. Um, and Monarchs probably don't see very well in the dark either, which is possibly why they don't migrate. It's not like birds. Birds like to migrate at night, but not butterflies much. So monarchs, they stick around on the ground for the night normally. What is the biggest monarch? The biggest monarch that's been found was 10.3 centimeters wide, so a bit more than 10 centimeters wide, where it's the widest, where the butterfly is the widest. Where are monarchs most likely to be found? Well, they can be found anywhere really in the 10 provinces except up in the mountains where there's milkweed. But if you want a better chance to see big groups of them, they like to rest up in Point Pelee National Park in southern Ontario and in Presqu'île National Park, Provincial Park, also in southern Ontario. That's where they like to rest up in big groups before they cross the Great Lakes. So you can see big numbers of them over there if you want to see them in southern Ontario. Why are female and male monarchs different? A lot of species of animals and birds and insects have different males or females, probably because they need to recognize one another as a male and a female. That's probably just it. Yeah. Well, this is the last of our webinars for this year from Hinterland Who's Who. But yeah, we'll see you in the fall. We'll cover other animals next year. So if you have other questions, you can always email me at info, I-N-F-O, at hww.ca. So you can email me questions, no problem, or you can have a look at our website, which is hww.ca. Oh, which one lives longer, male or female? They don't live very long. Insects don't live very long. The ones that live the longest for monarchs are the ones that migrate from Canada to Mexico in the fall, and that's the max is 9 months. So I don't know whether it's males or females, possibly the same thing. I don't expect one lives more than the other, but that's the longest they can live. Well, no problem. So again, if you have any questions, don't hesitate, and we'll see you in September. So have a great day, everyone.